Picture this. She was 83 years old, and for 4 straight days she hadn't spoken a single, coherent word. The night shift hospice nurses, well, they were entirely used to her stillness. But at 2 in the morning, everything changed. Margaret's eyes snapped open, and not with that hazy, distant stare of someone barely conscious, but wide, clear, and focused. It was like she just spotted an old friend across a crowded room. She lifted her hand, reached out into an empty corner, and smiled this smile of just pure reunion. And she whispered, "James, you came?" Now here's the thing. James, her husband, had been dead for 11 years. Margaret passed away peacefully just an hour later, still wearing that exact same smile.
It's the ultimate mystery, isn't it? The absolute final frontier of the human experience. But what if I told you that Margaret's story isn't just some spooky internet ghost tale? What if actual highly trained doctors and nurses have been quietly collecting mountains of rigorous, peer-reviewed data on this exact phenomenon? Well, they have, and what they're finding is absolutely mind-blowing. Okay, welcome to This Explainer. Today, we are diving deep into the meticulously documented medical mysteries of our final hours. We're going to explore what the dying actually see, what the hard clinical data proves, and why this might just completely change everything you thought you knew about life, death, and what comes next. Let's get into it. Part 1. The Final Visitors.
To really grasp the scale of this, you gotta understand that this is not some modern trend. As far back as 1550 BCE, the ancient Egyptian Book of the Dead actually described the dying being guided by familiar figures. Jump forward to medieval Europe around 1415, and you've got texts on the art of dying well providing literal guides on how to handle the visions of the dying. Fast forward to 1926, and distinguished scientists from the Royal Society were formally documenting these exact experiences. So we're looking at an incredibly consistent human experience that spans thousands of years and crosses literally every cultural boundary on Earth.
Part 2. What the data shows.
All right, let's step out of ancient history and into the modern clinical setting. I want you to focus on this number, 1,500. A neurologist named Dr. Christopher Kerr at Hospice Buffalo didn't just sit around listening to a few interesting anecdotes. No, over a decade, he and his team systematically studied 1,500 dying patients using standardized questionnaires. This isn't folklore, guys. This is undeniable, hard clinical data. And the result of that decade-long study is just staggering. Nearly 9 out of 10 patients, 88%, experienced vivid, emotionally powerful visions in their final weeks and days. These typically start about 1 to 2 weeks out, and they ramp up to being almost universal in the final 24 hours of life.
Now, I know what the skeptics are probably thinking. You're saying, come on, they're on heavy pain meds, it's just a hallucination, right? But let's look at the medical reality. Delirium, which is common in serious illness, is a terrifying, agitated, and deeply confused state. Deathbed visions? They are the exact clinical opposite. Patients become suddenly calm, highly lucid, and profoundly comforted. They don't need sedation to calm down, they just need the space to experience it.
Dr. Kerr himself, who is a man trained in hard materialistic science, had a massive shift in perspective. He realized these visions weren't providing a level of peace and transition that modern medicine simply cannot manufacture in a lab. His patients weren't confused at all. They were being profoundly comforted.
Part 3. The Impossible Cases. Okay, here is where we hit the anomalies, the cases that completely break our traditional scientific models of how the brain works. In the medical literature, these are known as veridical cases. Basically, this is when a dying person receives accurate, confirmed information during their vision that they had absolutely zero normal means of knowing.
Take the famously documented case of a woman named Doris. In her final hours, Doris was thrilled to see her deceased father waiting for her. But she also noted he was standing next to her sister. Now, here is the mind-bender. Doris's family had deliberately hidden the fact that her sister had suddenly passed away weeks earlier. Think about that. If Doris's dying brain was just randomly generating comforting memories, how on earth did it know to put her sister among the dead? And if you're thinking, well, maybe it's just a product of cultural programming, check out the cross-cultural studies by researchers Osis and Haraldson. They compared thousands of observations from the US and India. The interpretive lens changed. Sure, Americans might see Christian figures, while Indians might see Hindu deities, but the underlying experience was identical. In both cultures, they were being met and guided by the deceased.
Part 4. The Brain or Beyond.
So, what is actually happening under the hood here?
Is it just the dying brain misfiring or a glimpse of something beyond? We definitely have to acknowledge the leading biological theories. Science points to hypoxia, which is oxygen deprivation, massive releases of endorphins, REM sleep intrusion, and temporal lobe activity. And yeah, these physiological shifts might explain a general feeling of peace or some vivid imagery, but they have one massive fatal flaw. They absolutely cannot explain the extreme specificity of these visions.
Seriously, think about the total inversion of the wish fulfillment theory. If your dying brain is just desperately trying to soothe itself under immense physical stress, you would expect it to hallucinate the people you most desperately want to see, right? Like a living spouse sitting right outside the room. But the data shows the exact opposite. They almost exclusively see deceased relatives. Why would a failing brain be so incredibly specific about who is dead and who is alive?
Part 5. When bystanders see it.
Now we move to the most unexplainable phenomenon of this entire explainer, the one that completely shatters the dying brain hallucination theory. Dr. Raymond Moody documented what are called shared death experiences. These are instances where completely healthy, conscious, entirely rational bystanders, we're talking nurses, doctors, family members, suddenly perceive elements of the dying person's vision from the outside.
We are talking about highly skeptical, grounded professionals suddenly reporting that the physical room feels like it actually expanded in size. They report a radiant, totally unexplained golden light filling the space 20 minutes before death. They literally feel the palpable presence of unseen figures or hear unexplainable music. If the dying process is just a private neurological event trapped inside one failing brain, how in the world does a healthy bystander see the light?
Part 6. A new way to die.
So, where does all of this incredible documentation actually leave us? Well, it leaves us with a profoundly comforting reality. The practical takeaway from thousands of clinical observations is simply this. Whether you view this through a mystical lens or a strictly biological one, the data proves the dying are not suffering in their final moments. The transition is far gentler, far more peaceful, and far less lonely than our modern culture fears. They are not simply ceasing to function. They are being met.
Which leaves us with one final massive question. If these experiences are real to those experiencing them, if the dead actually do return to guide the dying, what does that mean for the absolute limits of human consciousness? Does consciousness just end when the brain stops? Or does it simply step into a room that the rest of us just can't see into yet? Think about that the next time you hear a story about a final, peaceful smile. Thanks for joining me on this explainer. Keep questioning everything.